like me to cover?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so welcome for those who are live. Thank you for being here. For those who are listening afterward, also welcome. So, our first panelist will be Tera Gardner, who is a certified life coach. She specializes in nonviolent communication, or NVC, and relationship repatterning, and Tara has worked with both individuals and groups on on these sorts of communication topics, and is a vegan, and often specializes in either talking to animal rights groups or social justice groups, or and recently spoke with the Stanford Medical team, and so today, so for our first part of our session today, Tara will be talking about some NVC concepts that often come up in the context of like intersectional social justice work. For example, the difference between a shift and a compromise in terms of meeting everyone's needs, and 4 steps to covering um, sort of to creating cooperation and agreements, and with a focus on on the on that concept, and also on like the difference between power with and power over, as a way to kind of lift everyone up. And so I guess for and and with that, I guess I will turn it over to Tara.
Hi, everybody. Um, uh, Hi, good to see you. Okay, so yeah, this some of these come across a powerful distinction and quite
I have okay. I'm
communication.
having okay. It's breaking up quite a bit on my end. I don't know if it is on your end, but I'm having
Yeah, mine is breaking too.
yeah.
Oh, you can't hear me so well. How about now? Is that better?
You know, that's better for me. For me, that's better.
That Jocelyn, is that better?
It's
Hello,
still
hello.
it's better. Yeah, it's better, but it still breaks a little bit.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry, everybody out there, because I've had some issues with my PC that all of a sudden happened today. And so I'm now on my cell phone, so it's just not as good. It's not as clear, but can you hear me at all?
Yeah, this is better.
That's
Yeah,
better?
this is pretty good now for me.
Okay, great. Oh, hi, Edwin. Welcome. So, so it's Tara speaking, Edwin, hello, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, so these are from a class I teach called Powerful Distinctions, and there's a lot of them, and these are just a couple of them. These are this is from last week. We covered some 4 steps for creating cooperation, and we talked about one, first identify your intention. You want me to go over that again, Tarun? Okay. So identifying your
Yeah,
intention.
maybe a slightly more abridged version this time, just because like people here have already heard it, and maybe we could go into more like more examples. That might be useful.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's just identifying your intention. What's the intention that you after are that you're after? What's the goal? And typically we want in NBC, we want the goal that, everyone's needs are met. All needs are met and all needs matter. So um, it says a strategy-free intention describes only what you value and the qualities you want to experience in a situation. So your values and on the qualities for the situation, starting with pure intention, is necessary when creating outcomes that will satisfy everyone. So, so if you have an intention to um, really, if you value respect and harmony and cooperation, for instance, you want that to be what's motivating you and generating your choices of words and behavior. Does that make sense? Okay. So, anything more you want to ask about that, Tarun, for instance?
I think that all sounds great.
Okay, great. And then number 2, I mean, these are, steps for creating cooperation, Number 2 is to create alignment. Is everyone on the same page? Do you want the similar result? So we want to see if we can create alignment. Creating alignment starts by getting really clear about what's important to everyone and creating a shared vision of success. So now it can be tricky if, you're talking to if you're a vegan activist at a big corporate, market chain or whatever, and maybe their value for success, their vision is, the money bottom line, the financial bottom line, and your vision is, to support life, to support, animal rights and well-being, and so, that's that can be tricky. So what you want to do then is you want to consider that our inherent interconnectedness, it says limits on how far we can get in achieving satisfying results without cooperation. If we have limits on that. So if we can somehow connect with that they are human beings too, and that they have values too, and that we want to respect their values too, that will create some kind of connection and alignment, and that probably they value life too, and they have their strategy. So if you can connect at least on what values you have in common, that will create some alignment and cooperation. Does that make sense? Sort of. I'm seeing sort of head nods. So yeah, it's just find the common human values that you can share that will start to create some alignment. Okay. And then number 3 is negotiation. And we talked about this last time, shift versus compromise. So we don't want people to have to give up something. We want to keep, Marshall calls it dogging for our needs, like keep going after what you want, what you need, what you want about your need. Keep going for that. And yes, and yet not to the point where you'd want someone to compromise their values. You want them, you want to see if you can create a genuine shift in their strategy for meeting their needs. So find the common needs, connect on that level, and then see if you involve them in creating a shift, a genuine shift into seeing that there might even be a better strategy. So for instance, if you come across someone that is like physically wanting to reprimand their children, let's just say, and you feel uncomfortable about that, that at that point, they're doing what occurs to them as the best strategy in the moment to manage the situation with their child. And you might have a better strategy that you would like to enroll them in that would still accomplish the same thing, get them to settle down or cooperate or whatever, rather than using, force. And so you want to enroll them. You want to connect with them on the level of, yeah, you value cooperation, you value respecting all humans, and you value life, and you value, wanting your children to feel peaceful and safe. You connect with them on that level, and then if you can somehow present a strategy, and like let's say, and the parent needs peace of mind, or they need cooperation, so you want to connect with them on the level of what they need without any judgment that they're doing that their strategy is wrong. See if you can connect with them on the level of what they're needing in the moment. They're probably maybe needing some support, some like support from the village, support from others perhaps, so that they can manage this thing that seems like they're embarrassed. Maybe they have a need for, you know, saving face and not looking like their child is out of control and that they're going to be labeled a bad parent. And so connect with them on some level of humanness without any judgment, and see if you can offer them some support. To say, hey, I would love to be here to support you. I know it can be challenging or frustrating sometimes when we really want cooperation with our kids, and so does this make sense? And anybody have any comments they want to say about what I've just presented so far about that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, especially on an individual level. One of the things that comes to my mind is, with all the war and all the suffering that's happening right now, is people are so polarized, and so even even couples are fighting because they're on different sides, and and it's true, people are suffering, but once you start accusing people, what's apt to happen is they get defensive, and so that's my takeaway from what you're saying is like, don't say something which is going to push them away or make them defensive. Do something which is going to bring them in, and then once they feel safe, you can start to have conversations about strategy or whatnot. So yeah, totally
Exactly.
makes sense. Makes sense to me.
Exactly, Edward. Yes. It's like people are so sensitive to being judged and criticized and
Mhm.
labeled and, devalued or whatever. And we don't want to create defensiveness or reaction. We want to create alignment and cooperation. That's our goal. That's our intention we identified, right? So if we can align on some level with the humanness of that person, that they're just wanting, they're in maybe a moment of anxiety, and they're desperate for some peace of mind and cooperation and support. And if you can connect with whatever's going on with that person on that human level, and approach it that way, and then you can say, well, may I somehow support you? May I offer an idea, a strategy that might help in some way? So yeah,
And
so go ahead.
sorry, but the other thing they might be feeling is hurt, and so maybe they feel that you hurt them, and so you need to acknowledge that also.
Are you saying heard?
Hurt as in injured.
Oh, yeah, that somehow you hurt them.
Yeah, I'm just, that again, the war and everything is very much on my mind,
Yeah.
and so, but also in relationships, people might feel hurt for one reason
Oh
or
yeah,
another,
right.
and so it's not just a matter of supporting, but it's also, you know, it's also listening to their grievances.
Yes, that's another example. So let's go there for a moment. Is that okay, Tarun, to go with the time? Okay, so yeah, let's just say someone says, "You hurt me. You did this, and and you hurt me." And I like to, I think it's very useful to not think of yourself as the cause of hurt. You might be the stimulus, but not the cause of the hurt. They're something happened and they're experiencing what they're experiencing. And if you can just stay present I think to the degree that you don't take responsibility for that, but you're responsive to. This is a distinction, responsive to versus responsible for. And that's a very useful distinction to get clear, I think, from NVC training, because to the degree that we feel responsible for something, sometimes can get in the way of being responsive to, being able to respond to somebody. If we think, oh, it's my fault, and then you start, inner criticizing yourself. We call that jackling ourselves inside. Oh, I can never do it right enough, and and then we can't hear that person. Oh, I'm a terrible spouse. I can never do it right enough. Whatever, and we start going into our own defensiveness. And if we can just hear that person, that they are having some hurting feeling, some pain, something, and just be open to hearing them. And I think, honestly, if we don't think that we're the cause, we will then feel less defensive and then have to go into our own story about it. Does that make sense, Edward? Edward? Yeah. So, yeah, just by hearing someone, really hearing someone. Now, sometimes what happens is when someone says something like that, and we can get reactivated into something, and we then feel upset, hurting inside. And then what do you do when both people are hurting at the same time? Who gets to go first? Who's going to hear? And so sometimes I work with couples, and I call it learning to fight fair, and one of the techniques of fighting fair is, well, I can't use my hand because I'm holding my phone up. Let me see if you can do it. Is to take a time out. I call it, just take a time out when both people are like, I feel hurt. I feel really upset. Well, I do too. I feel hurt. I feel hurt. No, listen to me first. No, listen. Both people are needing empathy at the same time. And then at that point, I suggest that people take a time out and just say, okay, we will revisit this later, and go to their respective corners and get heard from other people at that point. Call, maybe make a call for Empathy 911 somewhere, where you can get heard yourself and resource yourself a little bit. And then you can come back and be able to then hear that person's pain or hurting, whatever they're hurting about. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a technique. It's a strategy. It's a strategy that I think is effective, so that you're not just back and forth going, yeah, but you should hear me. No, you should hear me. And this can, this can also apply to the, activist on the front lines there. They're wanting to be heard, and these people are wanting to be heard. These people are wanting to be heard, and you're wanting to be heard. And it just really helps, I think, is to listen. I have found this over and over again. If you can just listen, really actively listen to the people, you don't have to agree. It doesn't mean agreement. But just listen to where they're at and what's important to them, what matters to them, what's the bottom line for them, or what's going on for them. Really, really hear it. That diffuses things and calms people down typically. I mean, and you can do this with a kid, if the kid is like, in the first example I gave, the kid, if you just hear them, I hear that you really want that toy. I hear that that's really important to you, and you're so upset that we're not going to buy that toy. I really hear it because you want it. It's really important. And you just keep hearing them. That will calm them down, because then it's like, oh, they matter. They get that they matter just by having empathy about it. And this, you can apply that then to a couple situation. You can apply that to an activist situation. Just start hearing them. I really want to emphasize here, don't underestimate the power of listening and empathy. It's like, it's I think one of our greatest, most powerful tools out there in the world. Make sense?
Just a quick note, unfortunately, Altamash is sick, and we'll have to do his portion some other time. So we do have a little bit more time. We don't have to. We can take a little bit more time then.
If you guys want to ask me more questions, I'll hang in here.
Uh,
Or if you want to say anything or whatever.
Yeah, well, maybe I guess one thing that I know Marshall sometimes talks about, and for context, it's Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of NBC, and is that sometimes people, when we use something like NBC, people will sort of be a little bit wary about that, because and there can be a number of reasons for that, because I think that it might sound contrived to some people, and they might be like, what, are you playing a psychological trick on me or something? Or
give me an example, Tarun, because I think if you're really using NBC, I'm sorry to just push in there because I'm just seeing the time. What time are we going to? 8?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, my plan originally, my plan was to go to like 8:30 or 8:45 if Altamash was presenting, but since he's not, I mean, I guess we can end a bit sooner. I mean,
I see. Well, I just, if you wouldn't mind, can I just say something about that?
sure.
If you're really using NBC is the spirit of NBC.
Mm-hmm.
It's not yes, it's based on 4 steps and 2 components. The 2 components are like the foundation, the 2 like foundation underneath the 4 steps. And the 2 components are empathy and honesty, being authentic and being empathic. And then the 4 steps on top of that, these are the steps, observation, feeling, need, request, the 4 steps on a foundation of empathy and honesty. Those are the guiding points, but the true thing is the spirit of it. If you're really coming from that place in your heart where you're being honest and you're being empathic and compassionate, and you are basically saying what happened, how you're truly feeling, and you're really coming from the spirit of it all, then that's what's most important. If you know that your intention is to include everyone's, feelings and needs, and you want a win, you're after a win-win, you're genuinely coming from that place, the words don't quite matter as much as that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think that yeah, and I think you're right that a lot of it is about like the digital vibe we're giving off, and I think that that's something we can actually talk about a little bit. I think that sometimes there, like one thing that can so okay, so I'll try to respond to things a little bit one at a time. So earlier, I think before you sort of said that, you asked if I could give an example, so I will. So supposing like it's like supposing maybe it could be I guess well, I guess you can give what are some examples that you gave, like say if, like in a situation where we're talking to, like say like a corporate executive of like a huge meat packing company or something, or like and supposing we say something like, okay, I hear that that it's really important to you to keep your bottom line and to make profit or something, and supposing if we sort of keep going, supposing we keep sort of hearing what they're saying, I think, yeah, I mean, I would hope that yeah, I would hope that, as you're saying, it would go that way, that we could at least have mutual understanding. Supposing though that they at some point say, "Look, I don't have time for this. You keep repeating what I say. Just tell me what all you want," or something like.
Can everybody hear Tarun really well? Because I can't, but can everybody else hear Tarun well?
Are there-
Sometimes there's times where he breaks a little.
Yeah, it's a little bit warbly. How about for you, Edward? Can you hear pretty well?
Mostly, a couple of words dropped out, but I could mostly hear it.
Okay, because I'm struggling a little bit. Okay, keep going, Tarun.
Okay, yeah, well, I get, well, yeah, I guess I'll just repeat because so I think what I said was, suppose in your example of say if we're talking to like the CEO of a or a corporate executive of like a meat company or something, and then if we say something like, I hear that your bottom line is really important to you, or something like, if we sort of keep reflecting back what they say, then supposing now I would hope that it would go the way that you're describing, where it's like we can mutually understand each other. Supposing though that they instead say something like yeah, I don't need you to you're repeating everything I say, like, I mean, just tell me what the hell you want, like, just like, or something like, just
Okay, so you play that person. Let's just
Okay.
say, okay, you just said that, and I say,
Yeah.
okay. So what I'm after is, and now I want you to switch now, and I'll play that person. Actually, you
Okay.
play. What? Tell me what you're after. Okay, I just said that to you. Oh, just tell me your bottom line. What the heck? God, leave me alone.
Yeah, okay, I can be quicker. Yeah, so what I'm after is that I really care about doing this in a way that's most ethical for everyone, and that's why I'm presenting these policy recommendations.
And so you would like to recommend these policy recommendations. Jocelyn, did you want to say something? Oh, okay, sorry. Policy recommendations, like what?
Well, so for example, I'm looking at a lot of other companies that have adopted policies that they don't source eggs from companies um, that use cages for their chickens, and I would really like to see if you would be willing to adopt that policy too.
That sounds very clear to me.
Hmm.
I like, okay, so out of the role play, I like the way you said it. I would like to see very clearly if you would be willing to consider adopting that policy too. That's a doable, respectful request. I like the way you did that.
Hmm.
And then
Right.
that person can say yes or no.
Hmm.
But all you can do is your part to present it as cleanly as possible to maximize the possibility you're going to get the goal you're after.
Hmm. Um,
And you did
right.
it. And that's what you did. And that person can always say yes or no.
Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. I guess. I mean, I'm thinking it's. I sometimes like sort of running with examples though. So, so supposing, so supposing they say, okay, the answer is no. So you got your answer, right? I told you my answer. So now, anything else?
Um, well, so you've just said no to me, right?
Right. Yeah. That person just said no, and not just, and sort of like, okay, I'm telling you no. So anything else now? Sort of like,
Okay.
almost, yeah.
Okay. So, well, thank you for being willing to hear my request. I appreciate that very much. Would you be willing to revisit this at another time? Maybe consider revisiting this at another time, or consider looking into that possibility. I don't know what you'd want to say, but something
Yeah.
like that, let's say.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And and then I guess one question that we could go into is sort of like the distinction between like protective and punitive use of force. Because, for example, and where does it become? I guess And one thing I think that this can go to highlight here is that if the question is when is it force at all, I guess the point it becomes force is when we sort of push with something that they're not clearly on board with, right?
Yeah, when it's force, it's I mean, Marshall Rosenberg condones the use of violence, let's say, he calls it the protective use of force. That's what Tarun is referring to if you're not sure of that term. When it's, like if someone's coming after you, like in a blatant way, someone's coming after you with a knife or whatever, and you want to protect yourself, or they're coming after your child or your spouse or a friend or whatever, and they're going to harm them, and you might want to take a rock and throw it at or something and hit them on the head to stop that's the only time he condones the protective use of force.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like you're trying to protect life. Now, in this case, as a vegan activist, you're trying to protect the life, of critters. And it's a little bit more subtle, Marshall was not a vegan, and so it's a little bit more subtle for the vegan activist. I am not a vegan activist. I'm vegan, 50 years, 50 years vegetarian, and the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years vegan. But so, yeah, because I don't want to create violence to that person by protecting animals. If I'm really a stand for no violence, I want to be respectful and hear someone's no and say, yes, I hear. And all I can do is do my part and say, would you be willing at least to consider this if I leave you some, pamphlet information about it or something like that, because I don't want to generate any violence towards them at all. If someone, though, for instance, were beating their dog in front of me, if I'm walking down the street and a neighbor's beating their dog or their kid or, doing something like that, I might want to speak up and say, hey, what are you doing here? In fact, this happened to me once, now that I think about it. Maybe Tarun, you remember, I was walking down the bay and, Mission Bay, and this guy in the parking lot. I was walking with a girlfriend down, the boardwalk, and to my side in the parking lot, I saw this man grab his little daughter. I mean, she must have been 5. His little daughter's arm, and he was like yanking her. She couldn't even have her feet on the ground practically. And he went to his truck and opened the truck door and took out a belt and folded it in half, and I was about ready to wallop her. And I just yelled out, what are you doing? Stop now. I just yelled out, And I mean, this is a long time, but I said something like, I think I said, that's child abuse. Stop it now. Like, and it actually, I mean, corporal punishment is allowed in this state, which is remarkable. It's allowed in several states. It's abolished in some, and some countries you're not allowed to have corporal punishment to the kid, but in some states it's actually legal. So what I said at the time wasn't even true, really. That's, I said it's whatever I said, um but I'll say something. Now I will say, please stop. Can I help in some way? If I see something like that, I hear that you're feeling really frustrated. May I help in some way? Where now calling that guy, calling him out and saying that's child abuse, basically calling him an abuser, was probably not the smartest thing I did, but I did do that years ago. And the woman put her hands in prayer toward me and bowed and said thank you, because he stopped and let the kid go, and she took the kid and he drove off. And so it worked in my favor at that point, but it wouldn't maybe necessarily always work that well because, maybe someone might get really defensive and really angry at me and take it out on the kid or something. It could make it worse. You know what I mean? So comments to what I just said. Let's hear.
If I can just interject with one quick thing, this is that it's possible. You'd really, this is very much speculation, but when you say that it wasn't actually true, officially that it was child abuse, it actually could have been, because, it's possible that he was about to do something that would have actually crossed the legal line. We have no way of knowing that, but, it's quite possible that he was. And so,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, but only
Yeah.
because I only mentioned that little point because corporal punishment is allowed in this country in several states.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Which
No,
really aggravates me. As progressive
Right.
as we are, it's just
Mhm.
unbelievable to me,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I think we're honestly not that progressive, people say, but I guess, but as far as, no, but as far as kind of the question about using, about whether that's the most effective thing. I think that, there are some cases, as you said, there are some cases where it is indeed effective, and then, well, and I guess when it's in a subtler case, like when we're advocating for like the lives of several like animals, let's say, I think one thing that sort of comes to mind here is sort of this quote that
I
people might
can't
have
hear
heard.
you. I can't hear you so well. I don't know why, but I can't hear
Okay,
you as
yeah, I
well.
don't know what's going on today. Like, just okay, is it better now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. So one thing that sort of brings to mind is, I don't know if people have heard this quote: "One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic." Have people heard that quote before?
No, I don't know.
It's the idea is basically that when you hear about one human or non-human animal getting really badly hurt or killed or something, we think of that as a tragedy. Whereas if we hear about it as a million, somehow it doesn't seem as, it's like the emotional appeal somehow isn't there as much.
Huh.
And
Okay.
and it's something where, and I'm sort of thinking that, and I think that's where it can get sort of challenging for us as activists to sort of navigate that, because the landscape that we're dealing with in terms of like the clarity of exactly where our impact will be. That's
Where what?
where our impact will be.
Impact, where our impact will be, I think is what he said.
Oh, thank you, Loki.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that can often be, that can often be a challenge when we're dealing with a situation where the benefits can happen over several steps. Like when it's not always as direct as like we see the animal being killed, we do something. It's very rarely, in fact, as direct as that. At
Right.
least in a more, unless we specifically like work on a farm or something. And so, anyway, well, do other people have reactions either to what I said or what Tara said or anything?
I had an idea, getting back to the conversation with the CEO of the meatpacking plant, who said no, he wasn't interested in your suggestions. That before you say, well, thank you for your time, and can we get back at some later date, you could also say something like, okay, I understand you're saying no. Is that because of the reasons that you gave, that you're interested in making money for the shareholders, or are there any other reasons that you want to tell me about? Other reasons why you're saying no to this idea?
Edward, I like that you said that. I really like that. Like you're probing and you're interested and you want to hear from that person with openness. You're not condemning them and putting them on the witness stand. You're actually open. I heard that in the way you asked, and that I liked. And
Yeah,
that's kind of engaging and enrolling that person to tell you really, you know, where they're coming from, and then they feel respected, and that builds that sense of connectedness and trust, you know, that you're not just telling them what to do, you're actually wanting to hear from them where they're coming from. That's respectful, you know.
And also, it's before you just end the conversation, it's just sort of something that, you know, we all do. Well, is there anything else? Anything else you want to tell me? Anything else you can tell me? So I just thought I'd throw that in.
I like it. I like it, Edward. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, and then all we can do is our part, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, we can just do our part, you know. Well, would you be willing to, at least if I leave you this, you know, these pamphlets or these handouts, would you be willing to take a look at it? You know, and they can say yes or no, but at least we can do everything that we can possibly do, you know, on our end.
And sometimes you can say things like, well, I think you mentioned this. You can say, well, thank you for your time. You seem like a really nice person, and I know you've got a number of concerns here that you need to take into account. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you say things like this, it sounds overly obsequious, sort of false, you know,
Manipulative.
But in my experience, people like to hear that. They like to hear, they like to be praised. They like to think that they're a nice person. They like to hear other people say that. So, you know, something to try.
I also like that, Edward, because in that context, they're typically sort of at the ready to feel defensive because, like, you're coming from such a different place, you know, you're coming from this vegan activism place, and they're already feeling like, oh, you're going to just wrong make them. And I mean, you know, that they're going to be made wrong somehow. And they're feeling ready to have you think that they're just really a horrible person, you know? And so if you say something just the opposite like that, I think that would actually be really useful, you know? Yeah, that you're kind of reassuring them that you don't think that they're a horrible, callous, you know, violent person, you know? But they're just a human. See them as a human, and they're doing the best they can with the strategies that they think are, you know, because someone could say, you know, all this vegetarian, vegan stuff, oh, we were meant to, you know, they could go on. We were meant to eat meat. We have, you know, what are you talking about? You know, where are you going to get your protein? They can say all that stuff, you know, and really have coming, you know, completely coming from a completely different point of view. And so, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, because especially because I think people are used to sort of being judged. I think that it's sort of it's like it can take a lot of confidence to to just, and it sort of shifts their perception of the movement, even of people who are on the other side of the movement. I mean, at large, not beyond just the individual.
Right. Because I think if the movement, if vegan activists, if the movement is somehow, seen as being aggressive and violent, you know, and judgmental and attacking the, whatever, that is not, I don't want the movement to have any association with that kind of behavior, you know? I don't want to
Right.
give it a bad name. I don't want it to be because I mean, then it's so oxymoronic because then we're advocating nonviolence against animals and yet we're presenting it in a kind of a violent way or powering over way, and I don't abide by that.
Mhm.
I think it's almost like you're saying people are primed to view it that way because of their defensive, if they don't have that view, right? So I think I think the point you made, I think was especially powerful because you're sort of trying to allay that by being particularly sensitive to, because people have primed now, they think, oh my God, there's, they're going to judge me, like you said, and I'm feeling attacked. So it just takes away disarms it a little bit, just makes it a little less charged. Even if you don't agree.
Absolutely, Loki. I mean, it's almost like a deliberate contradiction. You set up a deliberate contradiction to the like the big potential elephant in the room or something,
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking, Tarun, when you're talking about, by the way, I think it was just your microphone. I mean, your internet was probably unstable, so we could hear you okay now. I think it was just a little bit. So you're clear. It's just, I think the internet was unstable. But anyway, when you're talking about, one is a tragedy, one death is a tragedy, and a million is a statistic. To me, that sort of is partly because the one is usually a story, and the million, there's no story to go with it. I think people relate to stories more than just the numbers, the facts.
Definitely. In fact, sometimes, I mean, there are groups that tell a story like for example, Mercy for Animals once had a story that said, this cow is named Emma. Like we're naming this cow Emma. Maybe to the farm, this cow was just a number, but to us, this cow is Emma, and here's Emma's story. And that was something. I mean, I still remember it today. Like, I don't remember the details of the story, but I remember that name like years later, and that was exactly the tactic that they were using, saying this is one story, and it's not a unique story. You think they can use the statistic as well, saying there are millions of examples of a story that goes very much like this, and this is one specific example which we can have that sort of emotional connection to, and then you could say the same thing about a chicken or a fish or I mean it doesn't, I mean, or any species of animals. And in fact, one other thing that sort of brings to mind is that the group Faunalytics system has started this program that I would like to look into a bit more, which is called Different Strokes for Different Folks, given that like the strategies that may work in terms of bringing in some people may be different from the strategies that work bringing in other people. And I think that different people, I mean, but it could be because of our cultural backgrounds, it could be just the way our brains work. Some people may be more inclined to relate to like individual stories that they can emotionally connect with. Some might be more inclined to relate to something that they can kind of logically see as like a cause and effect, and so I think that just the fact that we have all these sort of all these tools in our toolbox, I think that sort of enables us to potentially reach a higher number of people.
Yeah, a thought came to me about the one versus the many. I think what happens for us also psychologically when it's so many is that it becomes so overwhelming that I think we can often feel disempowered when it's that big. And with one, we can still feel somewhat empowered and like we can handle that. But when it's so big, it's like it's so overwhelming. That's how it occurs to me.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like we can, like, in fact, there are actually groups that try to, I think, mitigate that issue by doing things like saying, would you like to sponsor an animal? Like, would you like to give money to, say, our sanctuary to sponsor this animal or something? Or something. And that probably works a lot of the time, I would imagine. I don't have official data, but I think that if someone can see this is who I helped or something, then I think then people can be like that much more inclined to keep helping. And I think that sometimes there can be, um, I guess, like for example, the group Animal Charity Evaluators gives estimates of how many animals each dollar donated will save. And I know that, I mean, I don't agree with Animal Charity Evaluators on everything, but I do think that at least for me that can be effective to sort of think about, okay, this is the potential, and to approach it from a place of empowerment rather than disempowerment.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it's been almost an hour. Do people have any closing thoughts or anything?
Edward was going to say something.
No, just that I'm going to sign off. I
Oh,
need to
okay.
get going, but I really enjoyed the discussion, so thank you, everyone.
Mhm.
Thank you. I enjoyed meeting you too, Edward.
Mhm. Cool, thank you. And I guess, yeah, I guess we'll be in touch about the next symposium or podcast or whatever in the series.
Hope Altamesh feels better soon.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Send our blessings.
Yes, I'll absolutely do that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's good to see everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
See everybody. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Um,
Bye.